Hey guys, sitting here with my man Cleope. He's the executive director of the Wings of Dragonfly, and he's certified drug and alcohol counselor and trauma practitioner. And he and I met in Cherokee County Juvenile Court and Family
Yes,
Treatment Court, where
that's
I
right.
was representing the parents, the mom, the dad, or sometimes the kid,
Yeah.
and he was the service provider,
Yes.
helping bring counseling to my clients. And he's decided to join me today to talk about something that's very important to both of us right now, and
That's
it's
right.
going on in the news, which is immigration enforcement in the Latino community. And more specifically, our concern is with the effects it's having on the children in those communities. And so, David, why don't you start by telling us, uh, what kind of psychological effect is going on with the kids in these communities?
Well, the first thing that comes out of obviously is the trauma that would come from being separated from your family in such a like unplanned kind of shock. It's a shocking event.
Right.
So the first thing that comes to mind is like, is the traumatic effect that it would have on any child and the families in general. So when I think about that, with the younger minds that are with their brains are not fully developed, you would think it would cause like a complex developmental trauma. It's probably the initial thing, which is not, when I say initial, I mean it's huge for a child or a teenager or anybody that's living under a roof of their family to be taken
Right.
away from that, regardless of the situation.
Now, you and I may know what trauma means, and I'm sure some
Hmm.
people out there, but for those that may not know exactly what we say when we're talking about trauma, can
Hmm.
you give us a definition of what trauma is?
Yeah, so I'll give you a long definition, the best way I can explain it. So when you think about your brain, okay, and when people maybe suffer from depression or they suffer from anxiety, or maybe even the other endless diagnoses that are given to people that have mental and emotional issues, right? Trauma is something that doesn't really get tended to because of the parts of the brain that it affects.
Right.
So, for example, if you have depression, you and I can talk with each other,
Right.
and hopefully through counseling, I might be able to give you a different perspective, or we can come up with a game plan.
Right.
We can brainstorm some things that'll be helpful to
Right.
that's going that negative effect on your life, right?
Yeah.
But when you talk about trauma, it's a very neurological, and it affects the part of your brain that it's not really thinking, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So, for example, when we're breathing in and out, we're not thinking to ourselves, okay, I have to inhale and I have to exhale. Also, when we are blinking our eyes, are all these instinctual things that happen to us on a daily basis, the things that we don't think about,
Right.
those parts of the brain are affected by trauma.
Right.
So it's a very complex situation that has like a spectrum that's, I would say, is more complex than autism.
Right.
So you think about your amygdala. Your amygdala is kind of like it's kind of like your instinctual, like, if somebody knocks on the door when we turn because we're not expecting it,
Right.
that's your amygdala moving you there.
Right.
If that trauma affects that in a negative way, right? Or your hippocampus, which is like kind of like right by your ear, it almost looks like a hearing aid, almost. But it stores all of our memory. These are very important parts of our brain that get affected through traumatic events or traumatic situations that actually, in cases have you will see the stunting of your hippocampus. What does that
Right.
do? It messes up your memories.
Yeah.
If your amygdala is affected in a negative way due to trauma, your reactions to things won't be regulated. Meaning,
Right.
if a big a known thing, because trauma is kind of trendy right now,
Right.
right? So
Right.
a lot of information is coming out about trauma nowadays. So when you think of somebody, a common term is PTSD, right? And it was
Right.
oftentimes we link that to people in the service that have coming back from war, right? So if somebody affected with PTSD, if somebody would knock on their door and they're not expecting it, they could do something like, like jump behind the table or, do things that are
Right.
just not just not a regulated
And they might not
response.
even know why they're
They
doing it.
don't even know. Yeah, so
Right.
and so to deal with that, you can't really take care of those things through talk therapy.
Right.
That's why I became a trauma practitioner, because I noticed, my scope of expertise is in substance abuse, right?
Right.
So a lot of the people that find dependency from substances oftentimes suffer from trauma.
They're just self-medicating.
They're self-medicating.
Right.
They're just using a negative coping mechanism to deal with it, because they probably went to therapy or did things of that nature. But that back and forth talking doesn't really help.
Well, let me
You
ask you
know.
that that's the setting that I met you in, right?
Yes.
Which is the family treatment court and
Mm-hmm.
juvenile court. And in those situations, the kids they suffer trauma when they're removed from a parent,
Absolutely.
correct?
Yeah.
And would you say that there's a difference between being removed temporarily in a defect setting where a parent is given a reunification case plan and they're
Mm-hmm.
given services and they get to visit with the kid, as opposed to in this situation where neither the parent nor the child knows what is going on?
Yeah. There's definitely a difference because of what you said. There's a plan,
Right.
right? So the children that are taken away from their families due to substance abuse, right, or
Right.
the parents have a dependence on substances and it's made their lives unmanageable and they can't take care of their kids, or for whatever reason, maybe they broke the law, whatever it may be that got them put into a family treatment situation, right? So this is a very organized process. There's a whole understanding from everybody involved, even, so under those circumstances, whether it be supervised or unsupervised, eventually the children and the families actually do meet each other
Right.
uh, throughout the
Right.
weeks that go by for them to hopefully complete the program, right? So there is, but there's still trauma,
Right.
a
But at
huge
least there's a little
complex.
bit of peace of
But there's
mind.
something in there. There's something in that process that gives, number one, we know that they're in foster care.
Right.
That's looked after on a weekly basis. Everything that they have to pass these certain, I don't know, they're like not tests, but they have to pass these uh, what
Standards.
were yeah,
Yeah.
standards. I'm sorry. Yeah, they have
Yeah.
to pass these standards for them to be living in a safe household. There is
Yeah.
communication with the biological family going
Right.
throughout the process. And, in these situations, when it's such a blitz of people being torn from kids being torn from their parents, there's really, the process looks, at least to my knowledge, not not organized to where those things that happen in family court are actually taking place, meaning communication with their parents. If you're naturalized and your parents aren't,
Right.
that's a whole process which I'm not too familiar with, to be honest with
Right.
you. But it just looks like there's a detainment
But even
that
go back to
concerns me.
your definition of the trauma and how that happens. So we talked beforehand that when even when kids get reunited in the defect setting with their parents,
Hmm.
that initial trauma of being removed, that's going to be long lasting
Oh
anyway.
yes, that it's, oftentimes it is, that a long term, it has a definite negative long term effect that.
So in the other situation, in these immigration detention situations, where they don't have any idea of what is going on or anything
Nobody
like
knows
that,
what's happening.
so the trauma effects of that is going to be even more traumatic.
I would believe so.
Okay.
It's going to be more complex, more, it's probably going to be deeper. Now, when you think about the reason why I said trauma is such a complex spectrum, because it's just what leads to it. We're all individuals. How we absorb, how we process things that are shocking to us are really how we do it. Like, you and I can see the same thing, and I could be affected deeply traumatically by it, and you not.
Mhm.
So that, but the ones that are, and it's where you can see that it's a definite, they're definitely suffering from trauma. The road back to healing, or just getting the healing, is
Right.
really, really intense and difficult to. It's
And
it's hard to imagine, really.
and you said that we don't necessarily understand the process, which I don't know that anybody understands the process,
Sure.
but we also don't know the conditions that the kids or the parents are being held in these camps. But
Yeah.
what I wanted to ask you is, What about the children that are naturalized that are here in our communities that are going to school or maybe the parents are going to work or wherever and both the parents and the kids are worried about they might not see each other for the life.
That's a big thing too, right? The anxiety of that,
Yeah,
just not knowing, like having to hide or like just not being safe. I mean, it's an extremely unfortunate situation, and
yeah,
regardless of where you stand, in my opinion, regardless of where you stand politically,
right,
for the reason things like this take place, regardless of that, I believe an innocent victim of this are the children,
right,
and it's usually long lasting. I mean, you could, when you think about mental health in general, it usually, there people, clinicians often talk about diagnoses, right?
yeah,
But really it's all in some way or another intertwined with each other, right?
right,
So, if you suffer from trauma, the symptoms you have are depression, anxiety, impulse regulation issues, emotional regulation issues,
right,
because your brain is so affected. So
yeah,
symptomatically, when you think about, common terminology is fight or flight, right?
that's right,
So a lot of times, if it's flight, you know, uh, it leads to, anxiety and depression.
right,
If it's fight, it leads to anger. And when you think of the long-term effects of, like, a child thinking I'm illegal, you know, um, it's my fault,
yeah,
I don't have good parents, the blame, and like this the way a developing mind like processes these really sharp situations.
right,
It's just it's gonna have a long-term effect on the child and the families. Even if they're here or afar, it's probably most likely going to have a negative effect on our culture and our nation.
absolutely, yeah,
Because of just because of this. I mean, when you think of, if it's anger, right? Somebody that suffers from trauma and uh, they're angry, right? And
right,
they grow up and they learn to organize, right?
right,
But they, that
yeah,
obviously you can imagine,
yeah,
what kind of effects that would ultimately have on
yeah.
the what they would see is the reason why this is happening to
I
them, or
already
this has happened to
understand
them.
how the effects of just being coming from poverty can
Yeah,
have on someone, and then to add the extra trauma of not knowing if my parents go to work or the grocery store, they may not
hmm,
come back, or going to school and maybe being picked on by the way I look and
yeah,
threatened to have ice called on me as a joke or things like that. I couldn't imagine going through that situation on top of the other issues that could already be going on and
sure.
just natural living.
Yeah, I think a thing that needs to be, kind of like pointed out when it comes to a developing mind is that these are children. They're still learning. I mean, there's an innocence that, that we as adults have, like, the blessing to be able to help mold.
Right,
And when you think of, like, the difficulties of that, we're both dads,
right,
we're
that's right.
raising kids, and, like, we have to really be on
Yeah,
point with,
yeah,
sometimes there's tons of mistakes that we make as, as
yes,
parents, right? Oh
yeah,
man, maybe I shouldn't have said it this way.
right,
I mean, that's a whole different thing though, right?
that's right.
Oh, I raised my voice to my kid, and,
Yeah,
man, and she's like, she's crying like, oh man, I really regret that. Let me go ahead and apologize and try
yeah,
to work this out so she can be able to process it maybe in a positive way, or like maybe, I can give, this lesson that I'm trying to teach in a different manner.
yeah,
But when you think about something that an event that would cause trauma, the shock value. I mean, we're all human beings here. Like,
right,
somebody takes your kids away, regardless of what you did. I've had my children taken away from me because, and I was guilty of the stuff that they got me for,
right,
right?
right.
I have a history, okay?
Yeah,
But but I was able to go through the process,
that's
right?
right,
I was able to have due process in my life to, do whatever the county or state said that I needed to do, and I was
right,
able to get to the other side and still have a chance, and, like, get reunified with my own children,
right,
and, like, make something of that and have a
yeah,
chance to do that. I would imagine if I didn't have that opportunity, even as a person that did wrong, if I never had the opportunity to reunify, or I had to, wasn't given a process to follow that could be helpful.
Right.
If those resources weren't there for me,
Right.
then it would be, I don't know where I would be today. I probably wouldn't have been able to go back to university and get my life together and uh, form a relationship with my loved ones.
Hmm.
Have a healthy relationship with my kids. You
Right.
know what I mean? Which is
Yeah.
difficult, just
Just
normally really
yeah.
hard to do. You know?
Right. And I guess that's where we're at now. Is we're not able to get in there and affect change just yet.
No,
We're working on that.
right here. Oh, that was good. We did that at the same time.
but but what's some ideas that we're thinking about? I mean, obviously we need to start investing in some mental health programs.
Sure.
What other things could we do?
Well, what comes to mind to me is, again, regardless of the reason, right? It's I'm more about what is actually happening, okay?
Yeah.
And if there's any holes in the process,
Right.
we gotta fill them, especially when it comes to these young minds
That's
that
right.
are being affected by this negatively. So, I think of like solid, just like, I am blessed to be a part of family treatment, man. And that's
Yeah.
how I met you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like being a part of that whole thing is really something to see.
Right.
It's something that you could really be blessed to like see children and parents get their lives together and become one again, right? So
But you,
that,
you start with seeing the parents at their worst,
yeah,
and you can see the effect that it has on the kids. And as the parent situation improves,
yeah,
and you can see the relationship with the kids improve, and when you get to witness that and be a part of helping that,
sure.
it's just it's amazing.
And I think about that, and I think I try to big picture the process, meaning, this is happening a lot. Kids
Yeah,
get taken away from their families because of substances a lot,
that's
but
right.
it seems like there is a process that, to me at least, and from my observation and participation, that really gives hope.
Yeah,
There is hope for these kids. There is and it comes with a lot of therapy. It comes with a lot of rules. There's a whole team that works around this process, to get to deal with the trauma, to deal with the negative
yeah,
effects, to deal with what it takes for the parents and the children to be under the same roof again, right?
right,
And it's not just here. I mean, this is happening all over. There is a
right.
process that we are attempting to work, and if, at least from my little observation, because I don't know what the country's numbers are,
Yeah,
I see progress in
yeah,
that. Right, I see
yeah,
a team of caring people that are really, their job is to get these families back together and to be productive citizens and be a family unit. Now, this thing,
yeah.
I don't know
Well,
what it looks like,
I think what we've observed, well, at least what I've observed, it's all about safety and stability,
Hmm.
right? In order for
Absolutely.
the parents to get their kids back
Yes.
in defects care, have to have a stable house, stable job. They have to have their mental health under control, their substance
Hmm.
abuse under control, which we've established that's probably self-medicating from the trauma of their
Absolutely.
childhood,
Yeah.
and those kind of things. And that's kind of what we need in society as well, right? We need to have affordable things, housing, stable housing. We
Yes.
need to have a process in place that's more humane and less traumatic for the people going through it.
Right.
And then obviously we need to have something in place to help those deal with the trauma and the
Yeah.
things that are going through.
Honestly, when I think about, from my experience, when it comes to separation, uh, I think one of the most important things is the long term
Yeah,
of it. Like, are we, since we're handling, the immigration situation with these families like this, what are we going to be accountable for long term when it comes to the psychological, emotional, and mental health of
yeah,
the people that have all been affected because of
right,
it? Especially the ones, that our minds are developing,
yeah,
that have no clue what really is going on, and are 100% victims of all
right,
this whole thing.
right,
Regardless, they
yeah.
are being taken away uh, There's going to be long-term effects. What is our plan to
Mhm.
deal with that in a positive, healing way that gives some sort of safety, like you said, some sort of stability, and some sort of like consistency in
Yeah.
their life? You know, what are we doing? You know, what's the process? I'd love to be a part of it.
Well,
You know,
you're going to be a
I'm
part
all
of
for
it
that.
with me,
Yeah. Right.
I think this is the beginning of that, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming today and
Absolutely,
speaking
man.
with me.
Thank you
And
for having me.
yeah, man,
This is really cool.
yeah, it is kind of cool. I appreciate it, man. My man. But before we get out of here,
Yeah.
tell them where they can find you and what you got going on, and about your team. You got a
Oh
pretty
my
good team
goodness.
too.
Yeah, I got a great team. You know, we have a new counseling practice here in Woodstock called the Wings of Dragonfly. You know, our focus is substance abuse, mental health. We have an intensive outpatient program, and you know, we're just hoping to give people second chances, maybe more than the second chance, and just ultimately give whoever comes in our door the hope that they can get things together and
Yeah,
be
man.
productive and live manageable lives.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome, man. Well, tell everybody I said hi. Yeah.
I will,
And
definitely, definitely.
if you're looking for my stuff, y'all know it's Harden
There it
Law
is,
or
man.
Harden for Congress.
Yeah.
You can find me at chrishardenforcongress.com. That's where all my stuff is. I just want to thank David for coming and giving his time to me